hoping to have another appointment within the next few weeks. So we are well on our way. We have a full agenda. And did someone just join? No, we still don't have. Okay. We have a full agenda, and I want to move it along. We can't vote on the minutes. So I'm going to go into new business and ask Elizabeth to provide her update. We're going to switch the order under new business item 4. Elizabeth?
Thank you, Greg. Well, as we are in the midst of election season, I just want to point out the importance of libraries with information literacy, and how important it is to have citizens and residents who know how to find real resources and access to those things. I wanted to point out that CCM is having a virtual convention coming up. That's the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities. One item of note is a program titled "Why is Now the Best Time for a Capital Project?" Learn why now is the best time to build and how times of uncertainty affect future construction projects. Discussion on how product supply, productivity, market competition, lower interest rates, professional consultants, construction delivery method, and bidding environment impact project costs. You'll walk away from this interactive workshop with an understanding how best to conceptualize and organize, keep a program going, and keep costs under control. We will end with a speed of do's and don'ts. So I want to let everybody know that that is available, and as members of this building committee, you would have access to that. I wanted to mention a few continuing building issues at both Prosser and McMahon. McMahon had a leak overnight in a new location, and Prosser's HVAC systems continue to not be heating properly, and we've had consultants there 3 times over the past week to address those issues. Finally, I wanted to talk about the survey a little bit. As a staff, we were able to discuss the survey consultants and some of the things that were discussed at our previous building committee. We do think that there are a lot of pros to using the survey consultants, and we look forward to seeing exactly what they would do on our behalf. I also wanted to share with the building committee a little bit about our digital reach. Bloomfield Public Library has 3 locations currently: Prosser, McMahon, Wittenbury, and our 3rd location. We take our 3rd location just as seriously as we do our physical locations, and we keep relevant statistics about our 3rd location as well. This includes our digital reach in terms of social media and our website. And I've shared with the library board. I also wanted to share with all of you just some numbers over the past year. I'm just going to share this. So this is a little bit of where we've gone from last year at this time to this year at this time. Our digital interactions total include our reach with online resources, digital circulation, our museum passes, website visits, Facebook interactions, and Instagram interactions. I would like to just show that, you know, when I started in Bloomfield, we had 278 Instagram followers. We have reached over 500. Similarly for Facebook, we are looking forward to reaching 1,000 people. And when you think about the number of households in Bloomfield and that reach, it's a pretty good reach. We hope to improve upon that and to make sure that the library is able to share information far and wide. We do hope that whatever survey work we decide to do in the digital realm, we will be able to push out through these avenues. I was able to touch base with Dave about this, and Dave and I work together regularly to share information. Dave pushes out information upon request about the library, and I do the same for Dave's department. We both have the library's email distribution list includes just over 1,000 recipients. Dave's email distribution list includes just over 2,000 email recipients. We do think that any survey that is done, we could very effectively share that information without having any issues with our current privacy policies. Hold on, sweetie. Is there any questions about this information here in terms of our digital reach and our email distribution lists as far as surveying the community during this time?
I have one, Elizabeth.
Yes.
There are a lot of people in town also that are on the town's email list that probably are not on either your or Dave Malesko's list. So you might want to include that email list as well.
Okay. I will find out about that. We would definitely want to use that email distribution list as well. The interesting thing to note about this was something Dave and I talked about. You know, the goal of sharing information is to get things out in front of people 6 times. And I know that that's very impossible, but with this overlap, we do think that the digital reach would be quite effective. Again, the hard thing would be that in person and reaching the people that are hardest to reach. So we're specifically curious about how the survey consultants think they would be able to help us with that part of that.
Elizabeth, do you have any specific areas that you would like to see the consultants, assist with that you can share with us?
Yes, we would. I guess the number one thing would be for the people who we are not reaching, to find out what, if anything, they think the library can do for them. I think one of the biggest issues we see in underserved communities is people don't even realize what it is they're missing out on. So if we could get help on identifying that, I mean, and help with exactly what it is people would want us to help them with. The worry that we have and why we are excited for the help with this is I think that a lot of people, when they think about libraries, it's very traditional ideas of what libraries do. I can tell you that Bloomfield Public Library is very much about the future of libraries and taking that long view of where libraries can go. And so we're hoping that this survey, if it's able to reach a broad audience, will also help us share in that message a little bit and get feedback that we can apply moving forward. And we love constructive criticism. So even if there's people that have things to say like, oh, I would never need anything from them, all of it we would be curious about. And I don't know if my board wanted to add anything about that.
Anyone? No. Lois, yes, please.
Greg, or Elizabeth, is there any way to use our GIS system to see whether people who have library cards are, or people who don't have library cards are located in certain areas of town so that we could plan outreach, not just electronically, but physically?
That is a great question. One of the data points we do have for every Bloomfield library card holder is an address. I would need to investigate how we could research that. But that would be a really fascinating trend to look at.
And it might get some person-to-person contact that would be helpful.
one of the things that we have done is we have asked the consultants to provide a proposal. And we hope to have a proposal by the end of the week. And I'd like to share that with the committee to get people's input and feedback as to what specifically we would like to see the consultants do. We've talked a lot about community outreach, and we want to make sure that in addition to having a survey, that we discuss forums, and Lois just touched upon how do we make sure that we have a broad, expandable base so that we're reaching everyone. And I think some of those issues we can talk through with the consultant to find, sort of best practices and ways to do that. But my hope is that once we get the proposal, that we can take a look at that and come prepared at our next meeting to really dive in and give a thumbs up or down vis-a-vis the proposal. But I would like to, Ava, yes, please.
Yeah, I'm also thinking about maybe some kind of traditional ways of reaching people who might not have access, who define the digital divide. I know the library has put flyers in people's bags at Geisler's and other supermarkets. Sometimes when something is going on in town, we actually get a card or a mailer physically in the mail. So for people who don't have digital access, maybe that's not a super expensive way to be able to get more input from people.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
One thing I forgot to note, CCM will print out mailers for free. And all the Bloomfield residents on this phone call should have received a summer reading mailer from the library this summer. That's who we used. It was a beautiful flyer. So anything we want to print, they will do the full print run for free. And then we just have to pay for the mailing, to put it through the mail service.
And I know that we have allocated $5,000 in our pre-referendum budget that could cover the cost for the consultant. But again, it would depend on the services and the scope. But we have dollars available for that should we decide to go in that direction. And so I don't want to spend a lot of time because, again, we'll get the proposal, we'll have an opportunity to vet, but also wanted to find out if people think that it's something that we could use and be beneficial to the committee. And it seems like most people think yes, but if you don't think so, now's the time to share that feeling. Anybody? No? Okay. Elizabeth, I had a question with respect to some of the information you were showing. You were showing Instagram and Facebook. Do we have people double counted? Like someone could be a Facebook, contact,
Yes.
and Insta and blah, blah, blah. Okay.
We do see that there are specific populations to both, but think of it like a Venn diagram. There's definitely an overlap in the middle,
Okay.
especially probably with our 20 and 30 somethings.
I just signed up to be a follower, so the numbers just went up by 1.
Oh, I forgot to tell Bob that. Bob, as a new committee member, we invite you to follow us on Facebook and Instagram and to check out our website too, to get an idea of all the things we're doing.
Any questions for Elizabeth or comments?
There's a lot of stuff. To
Comment. These reports that we're getting from you, Elizabeth, are great with regards to problems with the existing building. And then we all learned as we walked through the buildings, inadequacies about a lot of things going on with the buildings, why we need a new library. And that should all become consolidated as part of the pre-referendum package. So we don't want to lose track of all of these things that are happening now, problems, money spent to maintain, an older building, and all those things, just so we have a nice presentation in the referendum package to the public.
I think, Mark, the Public Works Department, who I'm going to give a shout out to, they've been short-staffed and we've had a department head leave and some other leadership positions, and they've been struggling to learn these systems. So for instance, the elevator is completely outdated. The elevator company had to bring in somebody who was retired to fix the elevator at Prosser. The HVAC system, like I mentioned earlier, no one knows how to work it. So it's just consultants all the time. I feel like Prosser in a lot of ways is becoming a money pit, and the crumbling facade at Prosser on Tugseas Avenue. It's something every single day. And thank you to the Public Works Department for working with us to get through those issues and to be able to keep our buildings open to the public.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
But I will start a document, Mark, about that.
Great.
Okay. All right, we're going to roll into our project update with Taisu Kim Partners, and we have Richard and Whit on the line. And before we get into that, I just wanted to thank them. We had some communications where we tried to put together a process and a roadmap that would be beneficial to members of the committee. It was shared late this afternoon, and a document that we will review at each meeting, essentially going over milestones, criteria, and other helpful information. And I'm hopeful, and Richard will walk us through this, but I'm hoping that the milestones and timeline will be very beneficial for those of us who want to sort of see the direction and roadmap as to where we're going, when we need to get there, and how we're going to get there. So I want to thank the folks from Taisu Kim for helping us put that documentation together, and I'll turn it over to Whit and Richard.
Okay, great. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Madam Mayor, members of the committee, and anybody else who may be listening in. I know this is a public meeting, so there are people out there. Whit and I came to the library earlier this week on Monday with our partner, Taisu Kim, and our project manager, Deanna Lancer. And we met your library director, Elizabeth Lane, and we met your staff people at your sites at Prosser and McMahon. We didn't visit the virtual site, but I like how Elizabeth talks about Bloomfield Library being 3 locations for now. And it was a very good tour. I heard in a previous committee meeting that you taken tours, and so we wanted to be in the loop. And so we took a tour ourselves. We saw some of the things that had been changed in Prosser since the last time I was there, which was over a year ago. And it was nice to go into McMahon again. I had been in that building when there were some public meetings, but my partners had not been in that meeting previously, so it was good to see it. In our meeting with Elizabeth, we shared some thoughts, some ideas, and I asked her a probing question, which she was generous enough to respond to, which is, have you ever seen a library that you thought performs the way you envision Bloomfield Library should perform? And she did share some thoughts about that. At some point, hopefully she will share that with you. But the reason I bring this up is because that's a critical ingredient in planning a building, is how you envision the use of the building. We had touched upon that briefly when we met with the Bergers last time, and they said, yeah, you do have to have a vision, and it's very much around the activities that occur in the building. That's one of the things I want to talk about. So I did distribute through Greg and Nancy 5 pages that I would like to share with you that outline the milestones and some deadlines that I'm going to impose upon this group with your permission. So if I could share my screen, I could walk you through these 5 pages.
Hold on. There we go.
Okay, so the first page is an update on the milestones. Hopefully you can see this now. It is similar in format to what we had presented previously, but we've added some additional information. Some of the things are exactly the same, such as town council approval to go ahead with the referendum. We're targeting July of 2021 for that. That has not changed. We were planning to present site options to the committee the latter part of February and March in this milestone, and have an initial meeting with the town council sometime in April of next year. One of the things that has changed, though, in this timeline is that we had previously approximately 6 months allocated for site selection and the preparation of our presentation of options to the committee. Roughly 3 months for each part. 3 months for a site selection study, 3 months for the preparation of those site options to the committee. We have been lagging behind, quite frankly, on the site selection aspect of it, but we have enough time to make up in the latter part of February and March in this timeline. So I'm going to focus now on some important interim milestones that need to occur. And I've numbered them on this chart 1 through 7, as you can see here. And I've chosen to place certain deadlines on those interim milestones, which we can discuss. Those are placeholders, in my opinion. I need the committee's consensus and I need the committee's reaction to them. These 7 milestone dates, if you look at the next page, are enlarged here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And these can be thought of as library programming effort, identifying sites effort, and the community outreach and survey effort. So I was very pleased to hear what you were thinking about earlier about possibly retaining a library or survey consultant. If we think about the library programming, this goes back to what I mentioned a minute ago about the question I had posed to Elizabeth. Can you envision a library that can deliver the program? That is something that needs to be documented. And what I'm proposing is that we start having programming meetings. That would be from personnel from my office with Elizabeth Lane, that's what EL is, and maybe a library consultant, and maybe there would be other participants from this committee, but we need to have meetings to discuss what kinds of activities you envision in the future Bloomfield Library. And I've allocated the month of November pretty much from November 9th through December 9th. At the end of that period, we would deliver a program, a document that we would call a draft program. Again, it would be jointly authored, but it would be something that would be presented to this committee. The committee could deliberate over it and then eventually accept that draft, because that becomes the basis for planning the new building or buildings, because it may involve a main library, the branch library, or perhaps more than that. But that's something that needs to be documented and delivered to the committee. That doesn't mean that that document is frozen in time. It can be adjusted as we develop the study, but we do need to have that as a starting point. Tasks 3, 4, and 5 really focus on identifying the sites. And quite frankly, we need to get started on this. And I know that the selection of sites can be controversial, especially if they're privately owned. And if that privately owned parcels are discussed in a public forum such as this, it could compromise your negotiation strength. So I realize that sometimes if we discuss privately owned parcels, it may have to be done in executive session. However, there may be some sites that the committee already is aware of that are not controversial. and are likely candidates and probably can be shared with the public at this time. Presumably one of the sites, for example, would be the existing building at Prosser, on the Prosser site. And perhaps another one that is not controversial is the McMahon site. And so with your permission, we would like to get started on those sites. We have not been told what the sites are. So let's think about them as the initial list of sites. And if you can identify 2 or 3 that you're comfortable with, that's great. And then a little bit later, you can identify the remaining sites. I think at a previous meeting, I heard there could be 6 or possibly even 7 sites. Now, one of the mechanisms I would recommend we do is meet with the town planner. The town planner has a pretty good idea of what the future of the town is, because every 10 years, the town planning department has to submit a plan of conservation and development for the town. That's something that you are required to do. So he has a pretty good sense of areas of development in town, population growth, where sites are potentially developable sites. The list of developable sites in any town is dwindling, what with DEEP regulations, flooding, wetland, those kinds of concerns, and being more and more significant. So if we met with the town planner, and I'm suggesting that my firm can do that, we could schedule a meeting with them and we could discuss from a town planner's perspective what sites might be viable. And then we would come back to this committee with that list of recommended sites to be considered from the town planner. And I'm suggesting that I do that, or my firm does that, starting tomorrow. We could schedule a meeting with the town planner and then come back to the committee. And hopefully then I could ask the committee to identify the remaining sites for us to consider. So think of it as the initial sites that you can authorize us, hopefully tonight, to proceed with. And then the remaining sites, which after we meet with the town planner, we can identify. The third, or tasks 6 and 7, fall into the third category here, community outreach and survey. Hopefully you agreed to select a library consultant to work with the committee and with us and with the library director. And hopefully that could happen at the next committee meeting, November 18th. I think we're all thinking this along the same lines, Greg. So I chose to put this on this next list of tasks. That library consultant could be tasked, in addition to creating a survey and preparing an outreach effort, he could also, or they could also participate in the first task up above, conducting programming meetings. That's why I say maybe library consultant if you task them with that effort, because they have seen a lot of libraries. You heard their experience. They could share with you what other libraries have been doing and what the Association of Libraries has been talking about in its meetings. And if that library consultant is brought on board on November 18th, then they could certainly jump into that effort of programming. In my mind, community outreach and survey for the program and for site reaction from the public could occur sometime in January. Those are the 7 tasks I see that are the most critical right now for us to get going. And they fit into the overall timeline, as you can see here. These 7 tasks are listed here on the left. That gives us enough time to react to that information, start presenting the site options, and then meet the other milestones that you see here on this list. Do you have any questions about this so far?
Richard, I have a question. I've seen a number of draft programs and also site selections that have gone into the community for their input after they've been developed into a draft. so that the community has something to say and it's still fluid, so that if there's something that we say, oh, wow, we'd like to add that, there's still a possibility to add and revise. Do you foresee that happening, and sort of what's your experience vis-a-vis working with the community on site plans and programming?
So I agree that is critical, and that's why we have further down in this milestone chart, public presentations specifically for that purpose, is to get that kind of feedback. We could certainly publish drafts of site plans and drafts of the library program, and then have public meetings. And I haven't targeted dates for those,
Right.
but they could be February, March, while we are working on the options. Yes, that should be part of the process.
Greg,
Okay.
question?
Right here.
Richard, so at the end of the site selection study, and then moving onward to the next big red bar there, the site options, are you envisioning that we're now at the end of the site selection study, we're now down to a couple of sites, and you're looking at those only during that site options period? How do you see the end of that and the beginning of the other site process?
So I think that the site selection study we would try to capture as much information as we can from the 6 or 7 sites that you identify, and then we'll have to have some sort of way to rank them. And so the criteria that you choose in scoring these sites will become important. At the end of the site selection study, I would think we would have a matrix of the sites that have been identified and some way to rank them that the committee preliminarily does. And then some of those sites may just fall off the list because they may be unbuildable. They may be just too difficult to develop. And so we would have to give you that kind of information. And then after that matrix is presented, then we would focus on the ones that are most likely. And I can't tell you, Mark, right now, whether it's 2 sites, 3 sites, or whatever, or 4 sites. But hopefully we don't need to spend the time fully developing 6 or 7 sites when it's unlikely that they would proceed. So it's a short list. The site options is more focused on more details on a shorter list than the original 6 or 7.
Okay, so we have a goal of a short list of sites.
Yes, we would obviously present to members of the public and to the town council why that short list was created, how we arrived at that. But I think you'll find that it will be pretty obvious as to which ones are favored and which ones are not.
Well, that may bring about an earlier meeting with town council, but we have time to discuss that because I see you have your first draft to town council in early May, end of April, and just thinking out loud, it may want to occur sooner than that when we have the short list and some public feedback about those sites. So just thinking that may happen.
You're right. So we could easily add an earlier meeting with the town council. You'll also notice here that I have town commission meetings. So I think it would be good to have meetings, let's say with planning and zoning, with wetlands, or whoever the traffic authority is, in order to get those kinds of preliminary readings. Not that we're going in with a full site plan or site plan approval application, but we do need to get some feedback from those boards and commissions on how they would react to those sites. And yes, the town council could be part of that mix. Yes.
Thank you.
You brought up an interesting point. It kind of says, without saying it, is that we need to identify the criteria by which we look at sites. We need to identify that as we identify sites. We need to keep in mind and figure out what the important criteria is for the library, i.e. parking, i.e. Bus access, it's those kinds of things. I think we need to identify up front when we're talking about what sites we're going to look at.
Right.
You're correct.
That helps you do some ranking.
Yes, well, the ranking will be jointly by all of us, but yes, it is definitely an important ingredient in evaluating the sites. And that's one of the pages that I had prepared for this discussion this evening. If I jump to that page, you'll see, and this is an excerpt from the previous study. This is the list of criteria that were established at that time. There were 17. Whether we have 17 now is up to this committee to discuss. We don't need this immediately. This is a list that evolves as we get into the sites. And as we start examining the sites, some criteria may jump out at us that's certainly something that should be considered. There could be a feature on one particular site that is important, and so that should be considered in the ranking. I think in an earlier meeting, there was a suggestion that there may be other criteria. That's why I added this note at the bottom, other criteria. Maybe there's an impact on tax revenue. For example, if you're acquiring a privately held parcel, that parcel may end up being taken off the tax rolls. And that's certainly something that should be on the ranking of the sites. And whether or not the site meets the town's plan of conservation and development, is consistent with the town's image of its growth. That's another criteria item that maybe should be listed. So I don't expect that list to be developed immediately, but I do think it's important that we start thinking about it, and I can start developing something as we identify the 6 or 7 sites.
Greg?
Yes, Lois.
I have a question about the meeting with the town planner. Economic development has been a very central issue in Bloomfield. I guess it is everywhere, but particularly here, we've been worried about what happens to different parts of the town. And I wonder if meeting with the Economic Development Committee rather early in the process wouldn't be helpful rather than waiting. I know we have the vice chair sitting with us here on the building committee, but I would think we'd want input about how they want to see economic development happen. Maybe the town planner covers all of that, but I don't know that.
Michelle, you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, Lois, I can answer that. During the previous presentation of a proposed library, that a full presentation was done before the Economic Development Commission. And the Economic Development Commission did make a recommendation to the council, which is our charge. We make recommendations to council. So I would presume that the Economic Development Commissioners would be interested in doing that again if it is offered.
I was concerned about the timing, thinking that it might be helpful to have it earlier rather than later.
Do you want to give me sort of like an estimate of what you're thinking?
Well, just where they think businesses should be located, what would make the town more vital, what will hurt businesses if it's located someplace else, that kind of thing.
Okay, the last time around, the Economic Development Commission's interests mainly went to the town center and the effect of the library being presented there, since there were no other geographic locations proposed at the time. And also the fit with the existing uses that are present in the center. From the standpoint, there was a wide variety of opinion with regard to which of the sites at the time would be the best. I don't exactly remember how that broke down, but the statement that we gave council was a general one of approval that we were looking to have the library issue move forward. From the standpoint of this proposal being a different one, if you would like a specific consideration to be made, you can request that. Whether or not all of the commissioners would agree to do that, I don't know, but they would provide a recommendation on the proposals at hand, how many ever there are.
Richard, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
Yes, I think it's a very good idea. I think we need to incorporate that meeting in these town commissions and meeting activities. That earlier would be fine, but I think we need to have some information developed in order to meet with any board or commission in town, even just some preliminary thoughts about which sites are being considered. Here's what we're looking at so far, and get a reaction. So it could be in January, perhaps. I'm not sure how often the Economic Development Committee meets.
We meet monthly.
If you meet monthly, then we can certainly put that on this calendar and try to hit that date. I'm not sure when in January you might be meeting.
Greg, I also do have a question for you. If
Yes.
I may, I think it's most appropriately addressed to you. From the standpoint of site identification, and particularly referring to item number 3 on the Tai-Soo Kim immediate milestones chart, I would bring forward that the building committee has had no discussion of the sites, specific agenda item discussion of the sites. And before we proceed, I think that is absolutely necessary. It doesn't have to be a long drawn out point by point discussion, but I think acknowledging the sites, looking for general opinion and attitude about strong points and perhaps weaker points should absolutely be on the record from the standpoint of the building committee. And we have not done that.
Right.
And I think it's critical to do that. And if it means shoehorning it in here somewhere on this calendar to do it, that would be my proposal. My second question that I have would be for the consultant. Do you pronounce your name? Tell me how you pronounce your name.
You can call me Richard, but if you want to be absolutely correct,
I want to be correct.
it would be Richard.
Richard.
Yes, but Richard is perfectly fine.
Okay, Richard. With regard to item number 6 that you mentioned also, with regard to a select library consultant, we're only looking at one consultant.
Well, that's your call, the committee's call. I mean, we had been asked if we could bring a consultant that we would be comfortable. I'm not sure how we came up with the burgers. I believe that we had worked with them before. Whit, I believe, shared with you our experience with them.
Mhm.
Yeah, I believe
There are other consultants.
Oh, no, I'm certainly not taking issue with their qualifications. I thought they were quite interesting. Their proposal was quite interesting, but I'm reluctant to look at one particular consultant for any kind of service that we don't have anything to compare it against. So I would suggest that one of the things that this committee could do would be to do a little bit of research and see who else is out there, and do it quickly because you have these milestones set up. And we wouldn't necessarily be looking to interview them, but at least have a resume about what they have done and what they propose. And I also think it should be very clear what the cost for the services will be. So with regard to the points that you have covered thus far, those are my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michelle. Those are good points. And we will definitely have a discussion on the initial sites. And I think that's important. And what do folks feel about getting the second proposal for consultant? I mean, it's a timeliness issue, but I'm sure that if we put our heads together, we might be able to find another consultant. And I would look to Tai-Soo Kim for that because I don't know of any other folks in Connecticut that are doing that for libraries. But
I wonder whether Elizabeth might also be familiar with any other consultants in the region, possibly.
I agree with Elizabeth's assertion with regards to that. And although the the couple that presented at our last meeting, they were good. I don't have anything to take away from it, but I mean, you guys aren't aware of any other consultants? Are those the only consultants that you work with in that capacity? And
We
that's a
have,
question for Whit. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think isn't anyone else that jumps to mind at the moment. There are not a great deal of library consultants in the region. That's not to say there aren't others out there. But we can certainly do some more research and see if we could find someone in the region. But we would also open it up to anyone else in the library world who might have some contacts. We can certainly talk to some of the other libraries we've worked with as well and see if there are some others.
That would be great. Thank you.
Any other comments or thoughts, feedback? No. Okay.
Yeah, Greg,
Yes.
I view this library consultant very similarly to the other consultants that fall directly within the umbrella of the architect services. And there's a real interaction between the architect's team and this consultant. And I think that previous experience and endorsement goes a very long way. And I think it would be very hard to find someone out there that we thought on paper looked wonderful, even though they hadn't worked with this team before, just to keep that in mind. So I view the architect's endorsement of these people as a primary reason to use them.
Thank you, Mark. Anyone else?
Greg, I just wonder, what is the system for hiring consultants? Are we required to do an RFP, or could it be included under the contract with the architects? I mean, I just want to make sure we follow a process that's suitable for the town.
Right. I mean, I'll leave that to Nancy. I don't think we're required to do an RFP. This is a relatively small, I mean, I don't want to say small, it's a $5,000 contract that is already in our pre-referendum budget. We have money allocated for that, and I think it's up to us to decide how to use it, but I don't think it requires an RFP.
Greg
But
is
Nancy,
correct.
yeah.
No, you're correct. It doesn't even require competitive quotes. If the town was going to be retaining the library consultant directly. If it's going to be a subcontractor to Tai-Soo Kim, then there's even less requirements other than the ones that I think that they would extend to us, that if we were not particularly satisfied with somebody they put forward, that we would retain veto authority. But there would be no purchasing requirements from the town that would be placed upon Tai-Soo Kim.
Greg, I have a question. I agree, understand and agree that we need somebody to assist us with community outreach and survey stuff, but I'm not clear on why it has to be somebody with library consultant experience, why it can't be somebody who has experience with community outreach and survey.
Well, I don't think it's a must. I just think having someone with the experience of having worked with the library audience makes it easier for us to deal with it and better to connect with the community. Having that library historical knowledge and expertise, and the consultants that we met with, I mean, that's their specialty, and they've developed a niche, and I think that's why, because they're very, very specialized in their audiences, and it doesn't have to be, but again, I think that they know the library world.
Okay.
Certainly one of the keys with doing surveys is carefully composing each question in a way that gets to the answers that you need and the information that you need. And so someone who's worked in the library world knows how to develop those questions that will provide the most meat in terms of feedback from people. I think that's what they would bring to it.
That's what I was looking for. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think another argument is that, and the one that was most convincing to me about the survey, was that we need somebody who's going to build the information that we need to go to referendum and get the referendum passed. And they have experience with that.
Greg, sorry, Mr. Chair, may I speak?
Sure, I can't see. What?
It's Leah. I do know a couple consultants in libraries who have either been directors or, yeah. So if you'd like me to send you some contacts, I'd be happy to do that.
That would be great, Leah. Thank you. All right, and again, it's a timeliness issue as well. I mean, we'll try and get some information and interview another consultant, but hopefully, I don't know if we'll be able to do it in a turnaround for our next meeting, but we can make our best efforts to do so and get back to the committee.
Okay, that's great. I just want to touch upon a couple of other things that I have in this 5-page document, which, as you mentioned, Greg, we will update as we move forward, just to make sure that we're hitting these milestones or adjusting the dates for the milestones and adding new items that come up, such as the Economic Development Committee meeting. I do want to talk about the program very briefly. This is, again, an excerpt from the 2016 study. And this list of spaces was generated using the checklist and the forms that the State Library Board prepares as part of their grant application. It's important to do that, but I think what's even more important is to have a document that articulates the vision, and that vision should articulate the activities that you see in this library. And I think that that's why having the library director participate, and we can participate, but because we can translate those kinds of activities into floor areas and square footages, and we'd like to participate in those discussions because that gives us a great insight into what kinds of things you envision for the new building. But you can also bring in your library consultant as well to help create this document. And this is just a piece of the document. There should be some written narrative, perhaps some diagrams, even photographs, and some square footage, some target square footages.
Right.
And this is a critical ingredient.
Right.
I would urge this process to be started.
Right.
And I'm suggesting that I can start that with library director, but I would welcome any committee participation as well.
Leah, would you be willing and able to participate in that process?
I would love to.
Okay, great. Could use your expertise. Thank you.
Great. I have a question. Is this one, are you contemplating 1 story, 2 stories, 3 stories?
That's very early to tell. Some sites will naturally be 2 stories or perhaps even 3 stories. That's something that we still need to develop. We've done both. We've done libraries that are 1 story or 2 stories on a portion of it, 1 story on most of it. And I believe when we did the study previously, we ended up with 3 stories on the town hall site. And I think we ended up with 2 on the Prosser site.
One of the other questions to consider with the program and concepts, of course, is, are we thinking of the development of the library along the lines that Elizabeth talked about, your current condition of the 3 branches of, the current main library, the branch library, McMahon, and the online. As we develop the program, we need to kind of be thinking along those lines. The other alternative with one or another of these sites might be, depending on where it ends up, does it become a single larger library that serves the entire town? And that might have an impact in terms of the program area that's needed for the building, whether it's going to be all one place or whether it's necessarily going to be distributed around in a couple locations in the town.
And the other comment I have is that I'm not sure that when I looked at the proposed library program, which I recognized was 4 years ago, whether or not it today would provide for expansion room, because I believe that when this was done in 2016, there was some expansion room built in at the time, but things changed so quickly, I'm not sure that it's 36,000 square feet really provides expansion room.
It's a good question.
Right.
Yeah, so expansion was considered in the previous study. And it's definitely going to have to be considered in this new study as well.
I suspect 36,000 might not be enough space with expansion built in. Just throwing it out.
Okay, as far as the group that will be working on the draft program, what I will do, I think, is reach out with your permission, Mr. Chairman, to the library director and offer some dates, and maybe that can be shared with members of the community, and those who want to jump in can jump in, however you want to handle it.
I think that's great, because I do want to make it available for anyone on the committee who has an interest in participating as well. So thanks, that would be very helpful.
Okay, so let's stay tuned for that effort.
Okay.
I also want to share with you this information that we obtained. I can't remember, Nancy, where this came from, whether it was Public Works or town engineers, but this is the town center roundabouts that are being planned. And I'm not sure where that is, whether it's still a live concept or whether it's where it's going. Nancy, can you?
Yes, this was actually, the town engineer gave it to me. This was actually developed by the State Department of Transportation. And as far as I am aware, the project is still a live project. I don't have an update for any timing on it, but it is still a live project.
Nancy, where are the roundabouts? I can't tell from the, do you know?
Okay, so this is an aerial photograph of the area surrounding Prosser Library. Prosser Library is right here. And Park Avenue comes into the town center here in this direction. The town hall is located here. There's,
Okay.
there's the church here, and right
Right.
here is the town green. So there are two roundabouts being proposed here. And it's good that's why having meetings with the town planner, who probably is aware of this, would be helpful, so that we know what the future vision is for the sites being considered, as well as the town as a whole.
Greg,
Yes,
Greg?
Michelle.
if I may, I can just add that I do know from the Economic Development Commission that the project is not exactly described as online or to be done. But from the standpoint when the project is funded and public meetings are held, it's at that point that the town will decide whether they want to do those roundabouts or not. So the offer from DOT is definitely there with regard to the design concepts, but it isn't in the bag, so to speak.
Okay.
One other question that I have, if I could just ask a thumbnail question, very brief. I don't mean to get into anything that's going to take all night, but in looking at 36,131 total gross building area square footage, I would presume that that number is not cast in stone. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then the second thing that I would ask you is, how does building cost net per square foot in New England vary from other regions in the United States? Higher, lower, a lot, a little, what?
It's a big country. So it's much more expensive than in the Midwest, much less expensive than in greater New York or greater Boston areas. And so I've been trying to keep track of the cost trends, and it's been a very interesting market recently because of COVID-19. Right now, it's extremely competitive. People who have been ready to start projects are actually in a good position because the prices are dropping quite significantly. More long-term, as far as this library is concerned, and I think of that as more long-term. I think we're finding that the cost of escalation is between 3% and 4% annually. So that adds up very quickly. And you need to take that into account when you're planning any building. So we would need to look at, when we're doing cost estimating, and that's part of our charge as well, is to bring in a cost estimator to make sure that we're projecting to the right period of time for when we anticipate construction to be done, to make sure that that's folded into the construction costs.
Well, that's not exactly what I was getting at from the standpoint of having a reference point with regard to making sure that the building is what we want it to be, but also making sure that we are getting the bang for the buck that we are looking for while building in all the uses that the library needs in order to function, not only now, but in the future. And being mindful of where we are placed with regard to those costs per square foot, I think is very important, particularly here in New England, so that we can use that as a thumbnail guide. So any additional information that you have on that in the future, I'd be interested in that.
Okay, I understand. I think we
Thank
want to
you.
make sure that we're benchmarking ourselves to the appropriate cost.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's see, I think that covers all the diagrams in these handouts. Yes.
All right, Richard, thank you so much. That was very helpful. With respect to the program design and space, I know that I've seen on some other projects where you, here we go, actual site visits to other libraries in the region, where we can kind of go and see what's new and innovative. I know that COVID kind of dampens some of the ability to do that, but I've found it to be very helpful to see what other towns and municipalities are doing with respect to creative spaces and design. So I don't know if that's something that we could take into account.
We can, especially when we get into a little later in the development, maybe during the short list of sites, and we start talking about the kinds of quality of material, quality of construction. And so that you can, again, benchmark your proposed budget for this project. How does that compare with other libraries that have been done? They don't necessarily have to be our libraries. They can be anybody's.
Right.
To be able to compare. Yes, we should do that. I don't want to get distracted with those kinds of activities just yet, but we definitely should schedule that kind of activity.
Okay, great. All right, thanks. That was a great segue into, Michelle, I think this touches upon the issue that you addressed about site discussions, and that was on the agenda for new business item 2, site discussion. And so I think that we should take a few minutes. As Richard mentioned, it would be helpful with respect to their site selection studies if we could help them identify maybe 2 sites that they can begin working on. And so we have the site criteria in the handout, which was, I believe, on page 5. And I just wanted to take a few minutes to see if we have any what we would kind of call no-brainers, or 2 sites that we think are real potentials that Tai-Soo Kim Partners could begin their studies on. And so I wanted to open that up for a discussion. Under site discussions, Michelle.
Well, quite frankly, Greg, I wouldn't be willing to do that. Because what I think it does is it prejudices an opinion right off the top, whether or not it in reality it does, with regard to the committee as a whole, looking at what we have available to us, and as a group coming to some sort of general consensus, very general consensus about what we are interested in investigating further. I believe that everyone who's serving on the committee is a resident of Bloomfield or its environs, and or has been here for some time. And if we weren't interested in this, we wouldn't be here. So I think that as a committee, we should be looking at this together. I think that
we are together, and that's why we want to discuss it now as a committee.
But we're talking
The thing about it is we don't have a full committee.
2 sites here. We're talking about 2 sites. And I believe we should be looking at all the sites.
Okay. And I think it was recommended that we do two in the interest of time so that our architects have enough time to present and prepare the studies that will be needed.
I understand what their interest is, but from the standpoint of the committee's ability to come to consensus and review things as a committee of the whole, that's in our interest. So that's my position.
Okay.
And I agree, we don't even have a quorum. We don't have a full membership here to have that discussion. And I think to squeeze it in and to rush it in at the end of this meeting is it's not a good look.
If this would require a very brief interim meeting to be designated, then let's do it in order to help meet the timeframes that others have to meet. I wouldn't want to unduly influence their ability to do what they need to do, but we need to respect what we need to do also.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I think maybe the best thing to do would be to just identify more than one or two sites. I think we need to try brainstorm and identify whatever sites any of us think might be worth taking a look at, whether or not they end up being feasible or not.
I agree. Mark?
We need to have a bunch of things to think about.
So just to get the ball rolling, we had come up with 6 different sites as a starting point. And nothing is cast in stone about adding more sites, or maybe some of them will disappear pretty quickly. But there's a few distinct paradigms among those sites. There's the center of town, there's the east side of town, and there is the a new facility at 330 Park Ave, which is sort of in between the two. And those are 3 very different ideas for a location that bring up all kinds of everything that we need to be thinking about. And so just thinking out loud, I don't see how we drop any of those at this point until we delve into them more, because they do offer 3 very different solutions. And the existing branch library, McMahon, offers some subsets of that too, whether it becomes, I mean, it was originally included because if a new library is built somewhere else, then I think we owe it to the library system to make whatever improvements to that branch that would befit the whole project and the whole library system. However, it's become apparent that maybe that will be the site, that could be the site for a new main library, and then we decide whether there's a branch somewhere else. So that particular site, I think, has to be included. I think we have to allow the architectural team to get into that site and really understand it, what's possible in terms of what's there now and what could be there. I think the center of town is such an important place to develop options that we can't ignore that either. So right away, we've got those that they're not going to disappear. I don't see them going away. And I think we owe an obligation to really understand what it means to put the library in either of those places. And then the third one in between at 330 Park Ave, I think that needs to be broached as well. I think the new community center is very successful. I think there's a feeling among a lot of people to build upon that success. I don't know if that's correct, incorrect, but it's out there. And so I see those 3 conceptual ideas as very important to take further at this point. And there may be some others that pop up, but I can't see dropping any of those now. The site over at the corner of Blue Hills and Cottage Grove that the town owns, very intriguing. I think that's sort of, it has a lot of similar characteristics to the existing branch in terms of general location. Certainly much different feeling to the site. But perhaps if we get into the McMahon site, we could transfer some of what we learned there over to the other one easily as we move forward. I'm thinking out loud here of how we get going. Richard, you said you got to get going on these sites. And so I can't see not starting on those. You know, and there, like I said, there may be others that come up, and then we're not married to any of these things. We're going to all get a lot smarter as we learn more about them. What's possible in terms of design, what's possible in terms of cost, timing, and all that, and the general configuration of how this library system ends up with one, two, or well, I guess we're going to have at least 2 branches, right? Elizabeth, we're going to always have that digital branch, but whether we have 2 or 3 branches is a big question that we need to answer.
Any other comments from others?
Well, yeah, one additional comment. I know in the past that the elementary schools who in the daycare have taken time to go to the library. And for the kids to get exposed to using a library, what it means, and it's an important part of their education as well. So I think that's a criteria we need to keep in mind too, somewhere where it's relatively accessible, especially for the schools.
Okay.
Greg.
Maxine, yes.
I think what I hear some of the committee members saying is that we need to meet as a committee and review and discuss the viable sites that are available and come to some consensus before what's in the best interest. I guess we're looking for what's in the best interest of Bloomfield. And I hear what Tai-Soo Kim is saying also, that we should move forward and, you know, give perhaps 2 so that they can get the ball rolling. And I feel that there isn't comfort in that, that we are looking to see what's in the best interest of Bloomfield as well. So would it be a compromise to say that we can convene as a committee to talk about specifically about the site and talk about as a committee what our likes are for the different sites? I think we now have 6 different sites, and we might include others that might be of interest. But I think we have to form a consensus at some point, and I'm not sure that we know where we all stand on what we want as a site. And I know it's open for discussion, and I think we should have that discussion about the sites, and then once we have that, I think in the near future, and then we can recommend 2 or 3 to Tai-Soo Kim.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
I'm good with that, yes. Anyone else? Go ahead, Michelle. You're muted. Can't hear you, Michelle. Okay.
Mark very eloquently proves my point. He gave a detailed list of very wise considerations that might be taken into consideration. But the unfortunate thing is no one else has had the opportunity to do that. So I think Maxine has made the point that here we are at our 8th meeting, and we have not done that yet. And I believe everybody who's on the committee deserves the opportunity to do that. So I would propose that we set such a meeting with a definite time frame on it, so that the discussion can be accomplished and move forward, so as not to hold up anybody's time frame from the standpoint of the architects.
Okay. All right. So why don't we see if we can put together a meeting date. I don't know if we have to call it a special meeting, but an interim meeting with the sole purpose of site discussion. And we will go through those 6 sites that are already identified, and we can discuss any others. We've asked for the last couple of meetings if people have any additional ideas or thoughts to bring those to the group, and no one has brought any. but we'll also look to get some input from the town planner, and we can set an agenda item to have the site discussions at our next special meeting. I think
That would be awesome.
and that
Would it be
allow us
possible?
time. Can I? Oh,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, go ahead, Redunji.
Would it be possible for Nancy or for someone in the town to provide us with a list of properties in which the town owns to explore as other options? Mark
Town
mentioned
planner,
that Blue Hills and Cottage Grove Road is owned by the town. I know the town acquired Riley Lumber with anticipation of adding to the existing location. Would you be able to provide a list of town-owned properties that can be developed?
I can request that from the town planner. I would need
Okay.
some guidance, I would need some guidance
Okay.
on the parcel size that we would be looking at.
Okay.
To give him some parameters, do you want to consider all parts of town? Do you want remote parts of town? Do you want bus routes?
Something that's accessible to the people of Bloomfield and something that can accommodate the square footage that's been discussed this far. So the options may be limited, but I'd be interested in knowing what they are. Like I wasn't aware that the town owned Cottage Grove Road and Blue Hills. So I'd like to know what other parcels that are accessible to all of our citizens that could possibly be an option. Please and thank you.
Who was that? Mark? Oh, Lois. I'm sorry. No, Lois was up previously.
I wondered if we could have, before we start talking about the individual sites that we've talked about, talk about the parameters. We'll have that, I think. Richard, you're going to provide that list of parameters for choosing sites. We could each look at it and decide what are the things that we think are most important that might be helpful before we apply them to the specific sites.
Right. No, that's a good point, Lois. I think that is in page 5 of the handout tonight, the criteria for the sites, and we can use those criteria as we think about and come prepared to discuss at our next meeting the potential sites to get started with. Nancy, with respect to putting together that document from the town planner, I know you and I spoke earlier. Maybe we could just list those sites, but a lot of them are just remote, and I guess we could use that as our process of elimination with the criteria, because
Right.
Dudley Town Road and all that way out there, I don't know that that would be viable, but if folks want to see it, we can provide that.
Yeah, Greg.
Mark.
So Richard said that he's going to be meeting with the town planner, and one of the purposes of that is to see, what is available in town as far as sites. The town planner is by record also our director of economic development, so he's very well aware of open sites and what the possibilities are. And I know Richard has some semblance of acreage, the minimum, maximum kind of range that we probably are looking at to make this thing work. So, so just to address Verdonzi's question about trying to find other sites, I mean, I think we all need to be involved with that, certainly, but it's underway with Richard planning on meeting with the town planner.
Okay. Let me just ask for a show of hands, and if this doesn't work, we can, does next Wednesday work for folks, same time?
It does. Thank you.
It's Veterans Day.
Oh. Okay. What about Tuesday? That's it?
That's the night of the library board meeting.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's also the 3:30 Park Building Committee meeting.
Thank you.
I have to check my agenda before I can.
Okay.
Not allowed to meet
There's
on
a library trustee board meeting as well.
Leah,
We
what'd you
would love
say?
to have you all come to the library board of trustees meeting.
It's very fun. Are we, if everyone can do next Wednesday, are we just not supposed to do it on a holiday, or could we do it anyway?
Yeah, because
Nancy.
I'm COVID home, so I can do, I'm
I
pretty,
see Dave shaking his head. That would be no, Dave.
Traditionally, the town would postpone and reschedule meetings that were placed on a holiday. That's been standard practice.
all right. So what about Thursday of next week? That already, yes, Thursday?
What date is that?
The 12th.
Well,
It's okay.
Is the 12th bad for anyone? Okay. For you, Nancy?
Yeah, but you know what? Because I have another building committee meeting that I have to attend to, but I don't know that I need to be here. If I can, impose upon my colleague, Mr. Malesko, to do the Zoom portion of the meeting, I think, I don't want to hold it up.
Okay.
So if I could put you on the spot, Dave,
I'm sure that could be arranged.
thank you. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
All right. So we will send out an agenda for next Thursday, the 12th at 6 o'clock, and the sole agenda item will be site discussion.
Right.
And Richard, we will get back to you, shortly thereafter, so that we can keep the ball rolling.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you. Future meetings. Again, we're special meeting next week, and then we have our meeting, regular scheduled meeting on the 18th and the 2nd of December. We cannot approve the minutes. Any public comments?
Yes, I see that Counselor Curtin has his hand up and Mr. Sten Casperson. So we'll go with Counselor Curtin first. Go ahead, Counselor.
Good evening, everyone, Mr. Chair. I was not going to say anything tonight, but I think you guys had a really robust discussion in regards to site. And I know that I think a couple of council meetings before I mentioned about the importance of looking at the center of town and what that does for our community. Initially, a year ago or so, when this discussion was on the table and we were talking about it, I was convinced at that time that 330 Park was a plausible next to 330 Park. But as we move forward and we see exactly what's going on, we're talking about the center of town and driving economic development and so on. I think the committee has to really look at this hard. I mean, it can go any library. If you invest 20 million, let's say 20 million in the center of town, that basically sends a message to developers. I mean, you all know the blight that we see every single day with the Winterberry Mall. I think it's important for the town of Bloomfield to send a message to say that the center of town, that's going to drive and benefit everyone when it comes from a tax-based economic development, driving energy within that area. So I think it's great to have this discussion about sites in remote areas, but that's not going to benefit anyone. And I think we seriously have to kind of narrow the conversation down to the center of town. I mean, the current site, I'm not a big fan of that, but I know initially from previous plans, they had the extension of the town hall. I strongly would say, and this will be my opinion, and I will stand by it going forward, that we need to invest more in the center of town to attract other investors to want to invest in the center of town. And I think we cannot think about investing $20 million in some remote part of the town and think that's great. I think we have to be smart in how we proceed with that. And I just want to kind of put that out there for the committee. But thank you for your work. And I look forward to having discussion at the council level. But I think it's important to narrow it down. We can't afford to miss this one here. I think we need to bring some energy within our town center. If we look at our neighboring towns, every neighboring town that I could identify have a vibrant center of town. And we need to do something here in Bloomfield to drive that energy. You have Heirloom Flats, there's more development going on. We have Philly Park that's at the point of completing I think it's important to invest that type of money somewhere close where we can generate other interests. Thank you for your time, Mr. Chair, and everyone else.
Thank you.
Next, we have Sten Casperson. Go ahead, Sten. Unmute yourself. There you go.
Thank you very much, Nancy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have 3 items to comment on. 2 are very brief. The first one is with respect to your survey outreach. I'm going to throw this out. It's my understanding that there's a great deal of virtual learning taking place in the school system using Chromebooks or the equivalent. You're trying to reach people that are hard to reach. Hopefully, parents are paying attention to what's on those Chromebooks for their children. Perhaps it's possible to post something on those Chromebooks regarding the library and a survey, even a survey by kids. Get the kids' input. Maybe they'll pick up on it. Item 2, I missed last meeting. The minutes have not been approved for that meeting. I do not know, but strongly recommend that the recent announcement at the town meeting regarding bonding capacity and timing with respect to the library be in minutes somewhere. Put it in writing. It's another item of information for people that are going to be in the position to make decisions about the library going forward, the taxpayer specifically. Now I want to turn to the selection criteria. I've looked at these, I've thought them over, I've listened to people. A few comments. The first one is item 11, potential flood issues. There's no question but what this item is directed at the Prosser site. I understand now that the architect should be speaking with the town planner. I urge him to also talk to the town engineer on 2 subjects with respect to flooding. And really, I think what I'm asking here is what's the history on the following? If you look at the floodplain diagram, I should say survey for that area, you note that the property immediately north of the library has been built up, raised. And in addition, the owner has put the equivalent of a dam on the east side. He's done that to keep flood water from overcoming that property. The question is, what could the library do at its site to alleviate flooding? Can the parking lot to the north of the library be raised, elevated? Can a dam, and it's steel dam like I have around my boat down on the Mystic River, can that dam be put in there to alleviate flooding, not get rid of it entirely? And more interesting, I've looked at the culverts under Mountain Avenue, the bridge. Somebody should ask if that can be opened up more. Can you add a 3rd culvert? Can the Corps of Civil Engineers, have they been asked? This is a real problem. It's not a 1 in 100, 1 in 500 year issue. It's almost any major storm. Those 2 items should be discussed with the town planner and the town engineer. Moving on, the criteria do not explicitly risk potential environmental issues. I bring that up with 2 contrasts. One is the Riley lumber yard. I do not know, but I strongly suspect that an environmental assessment will need to be done there, and you don't know what the findings are. The contrast is 330 Park Avenue, the old 330 Park Avenue. We demolished and abated that site. It's clean, I'm sure. An item also not on the criteria is easy auto access for parking. I bring that up in the context of the Blue Hills Avenue, Cottage Grove Road intersection. Cottage Grove Road is 4 lanes with a median. That property would restrict access, whether you're coming east, west, or north, south, make it more difficult. And of the multiple sites that might be considered, I suggest that a criteria be site total acreage. What's the total acreage on each site? You already have listed the size of the building footprint. You also have listed the parking capacity. But my point is, get an idea of what sites are quote unquote crowded potentially and which ones are not. I know that's a mouthful. There are a lot of things there to throw in, but I appreciate your consideration and listening. Thank you.
Well, thank you. That was very helpful, actually. And we may want to give some thought to revising the criteria to include some of that. And thank you, Councilman Curtin. I've just, I don't know how many of you attended the town meeting last week, but in its closing, the library was not on the agenda, but there were 3 council people who commented as to preferences for the location of the new library. And all 3 of those council members made a preference for the center of town. And I just want to share that so that when we meet with council, we already have a little knowledge about what some of them are thinking. But it was interesting to hear that. I don't have anything further. Nancy, no other comment from the public?
None from the public. Gudanzi, you had your hand up earlier. Did you have a question or a comment you wanted to make?
No, I had already made it. Thank you so much, Nancy.
Welcome.
I would like to, Greg, if it's all right, just one of the comments from the public about the property to the north, just to inform our design team. My understanding is they are not building a dam. They are simply putting up a retaining wall so they could connect their north and south sides of the building around the back of it, grading wise. And that was the purpose for what appears to be a vertical structure that they're putting up. That was a requirement of zoning that they, in the development of that property, they connect their parking lots behind the building, and it required some substantial grading. And there was a chat item that came up I saw earlier from Councilor Wong, that I wanted to talk a little bit about that because I recently attended a continuing education thing
Mark,
about.
I'm sorry, Mark, let me just interject and make sure that everyone's had an opportunity to either read it or maybe we can share it with the membership. I'll just read it quickly. Economic viability is certainly important, and I would also encourage this committee to prioritize racial equity impacts when considering sites and throughout the entire project plan development process. And that was Councilperson Wong.
I just wanted to share that was exactly part of a continuing education session on what constitutes good design. And one of the criteria is social equity. The other important ones that were brought up were sustainability and energy usage, which has been hanging around a long time. It's not going to go away as far as good design. And the other was health and welfare, which also has been around a long time, but has really been highlighted by the COVID-19 pandemic. But those 3 things were really a excellent panel discussion, and just bringing social equity into the idea of good architectural design is fascinating. So I think we have a great opportunity here to include that.
Great, thank you. Anything else before we adjourn? Elizabeth.
I just wanted to comment that the staff did have an all-staff meeting about this subject, and we did create some vision ideals that we will be putting into hopefully only 1-page document to share. I also wanted to say that we have been taking a social justice lens to everything that we're doing. And in light of that, the McMahon-Wittenberry location was very high on our list of sites of potential. And libraries can be transformative. And I really think that whether we're, on one side of the town or the other side of the town, we will be successful in reaching a large majority of our population with everything that the library board and the staff has been working on. That trajectory will be positive, no matter where the location.
Thank you. All right, and want to welcome Bob Berman to the committee again, and thank you all for your time and input tonight. I thought it was a very productive meeting, and thank you for your thoughtful comments, and look forward to seeing everyone next Thursday at 6 p.m. And again, we'll get the notice out as well as the agenda and be ready to have a robust discussion around site criteria and selection. So thank you all so much. And just for formality, we don't have a quorum, but is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
All right,
Second.
second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you,
Madam
Greg.
Mayor. Yeah. Nancy?